Elon Musk shifted his weight from one foot to the other, his eyes scanning the digital display board above the gate. Flight 827 to Austin was on schedule, a rare blessing on a day like this. The chaotic hum of the airport surrounded him, a blend of hurried footsteps, the mechanical drone of announcements, and snippets of conversation from travelers on their own journeys. He adjusted the strap of his backpack, feeling its weight dig into his shoulder. Inside were not only his essentials, but also notes for a critical presentation and the prototype of a device he hoped would redefine energy efficiency. He wasn't in the mood to draw attention today. That was why he'd chosen the hoodie, the old pair of jeans, and the scuffed sneakers. Even billionaires got tired of the endless stares, the whispers, and the impromptu selfie requests. His mind wandered back to the countless events where he had been paraded as the genius billionaire, the innovator. But today he just wanted to be Elon, a man focused on his work and the endless possibilities it could bring. The airport, with its transient energy, felt oddly grounding. The line for first-class boarding was shorter than expected, giving him hope for a smooth experience. He had work to do, emails to review, and a few notes to jot down for a presentation later that day. The SpaceX team was counting on him, and he thrived under that pressure. Yet beneath that thriving exterior was a sense of weariness that came from balancing the weight of expectations, his own and those of the world. As he stood there, his thoughts drifted to the charity event scheduled after his meeting. It was for a cause he cared deeply about, providing STEM education resources for underserved communities. This project wasn't just another item on his to-do list, it was personal. He remembered his younger self, a curious boy with dreams too big for his small town. What would have happened if he hadn't had access to books, computers, or mentors who believed in him? That question fueled his drive to create opportunities for others. He smiled faintly under his hood, imagining the excited faces of the kids who would benefit from the programs he supported. The image brought a flicker of peace to his otherwise restless mind. Airports were always a place of reflection for him, a reminder of the journeys, both literal and metaphorical, that had brought him to this point. His quiet moment, however, didn't last long. Out of nowhere, a sharp voice pierced his thoughts. "Excuse me." The tone was sharp, demanding attention. Elon glanced up, his face still partially hidden by the hood. A woman was marching toward him, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She moved with the confidence of someone who expected the world to accommodate her demands. Her expression was stern, her lips pressed into a thin line that signaled disapproval even before she spoke. Elon's gut told him this was going to be one of those moments, the kind where his patience would be tested in ways he hadn't anticipated. He inhaled slowly, preparing for the encounter. He had long learned that in situations like this, patience was key. Elon raised his head slightly, just enough to catch the woman's eyes. She was in her late 40s, maybe early 50s, with a look that exuded self-importance. Her hair was expertly styled, her makeup flawless, and her outfit screamed high-end designer, the kind of person who carried herself like she owned the room, or in this case, the airport. "I'm sorry," Elon said, keeping his tone neutral. She let out a huff, as though the very act of explaining herself was beneath her. "This is the first-class line," she said, her eyes narrowing as she gave him a once-over. "You don't look like you belong here." Elon blinked, unsure if he'd heard her correctly. He hadn't come to the airport for a confrontation, and he certainly didn't expect one over something as trivial as his appearance. "I have a first-class ticket," he said simply, pulling the hood back slightly to make his voice clearer. Her laugh was sharp, almost mocking. "Sure you do," she said, crossing her arms. "Look, I don't have time for games. The economy line is over there." She gestured dramatically to the far side of the boarding area. For a moment, Elon debated whether it was worth responding. A younger version of himself might have fired back with a sarcastic quip, but he'd long since learned to pick his battles. "Ma'am," he began calmly, "I promise you I'm in the right line. There's no need to." But she wasn't listening. "Don't lie to me," she interrupted, her voice loud enough to turn a few heads. "People like you always try to sneak into places you don't belong. It's not fair to the rest of us who actually paid for our tickets." The words hung in the air, heavy with accusation. Elon could feel the stares now, the weight of dozens of eyes on him. Some people whispered to each other, while others simply watched, unsure of what was unfolding. Elon took a deep breath, keeping his frustration in check. "I assure you," he said, his tone still measured, "I paid for my ticket just like everyone else here." But Karen wasn't having it. "If you don't move, I'll call security," she threatened, her voice rising. Elon glanced around, noticing the growing crowd of onlookers. This was exactly what he didn't want: attention. Yet here he was, standing at the center of an unnecessary spectacle. Karen didn't wait for Elon to respond. She waved down a nearby security officer, her arms slicing through the air like a signal flare. "Officer," she called, her voice commanding attention. "This man is trying to cut into the first-class line without a proper ticket." The officer, a stocky man with a neatly pressed uniform, approached cautiously. He scanned the scene, his eyes darting between Karen's flushed face and Elon's calm demeanor. "Ma'am, what seems to be the issue here?" the officer asked, his tone professional but wary. Karen wasted no time launching into her tirade. "This man," she said, pointing an accusatory finger at Elon, "clearly doesn't belong here. He's holding up the line and making a scene. I demand you remove him immediately." Elon tilted his head, his lips pressing into a thin line. He was no stranger to moments like this, where someone's snap judgment became the fuel for unnecessary drama. But he also knew that responding with anger would only escalate the situation further. "Sir," the officer said, turning to Elon, "do you have your ticket with you?" Without a word, Elon reached into his backpack and pulled out a neatly folded piece of paper. He handed it to the officer, who unfolded it and examined the details carefully. The officer's eyebrows lifted slightly. "This is a first-class ticket," he said, glancing back at Karen. Karen's face twisted in disbelief. "That can't be right," she stammered, her voice losing some of its earlier confidence. "Are you sure?" The officer nodded, his expression firm. "Yes, ma'am, this ticket is valid." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Whispers of recognition began to take shape as people leaned closer, trying to get a better look at the man in the hoodie. Karen's voice cracked as she attempted to regain control of the situation. "Well, there must be some mistake. People like him." She stopped herself, realizing too late the implications of her words. Elon's patience had reached its limit. He lowered his hood fully, revealing his face to the crowd. Gasps rippled through the onlookers as recognition dawned on them. "It's Elon Musk," someone whispered loudly. Karen's mouth fell open, her eyes widening as she stared at the man she had just accused. The color drained from her face as the weight of her mistake sank in. Elon's expression remained calm, though his voice carried a quiet authority. "I tried to tell you," he said evenly, addressing Karen directly, "but you didn't want to listen." Karen stood frozen, her carefully constructed facade crumbling under the weight of her humiliation. The crowd around them was no longer silent. Murmurs of astonishment filled the air, and a few people even pulled out their phones, discreetly capturing the unfolding drama. Elon adjusted his backpack and looked Karen directly in the eyes. His voice was calm, but each word carried a weight that demanded attention. "Judging someone by how they look," he began, "says more about you than it does about the person you're judging." Karen's lips trembled as she struggled to form a response, but no words came. Her earlier bravado had vanished, replaced by the unmistakable sting of regret. "You didn't even stop to think," Elon continued, his tone measured but unyielding. "You made an assumption, a wrong one, and turned it into a spectacle." The security officer, now fully aware of who he was dealing with, took a step back, giving Elon space to speak. Karen finally managed to whisper, I didn't mean." Elon cut her off, not with malice, but with a clarity that left no room for excuses. "You did mean it," he said, his gaze unwavering, "and you've probably done it before, to people who couldn't defend themselves. But today you picked the wrong person." The crowd's murmurs grew louder. A few bystanders clapped softly, and one man called out, "Well said." Karen's face flushed crimson. She turned to the officer, desperate for support, but his expression offered none. "Ma'am," the officer said, his voice firm but polite, "I think it's best if you step out of the line. We need to keep things moving." Karen's shoulders slumped. She looked at Elon one last time, as if hoping for some sign of forgiveness, but he didn't offer it.
Instead, he gestured toward the waiting passengers. "Let's not keep everyone waiting," he said, his voice returning to the calm neutrality he had carried at the start of the ordeal. Karen shuffled away, her head bowed, while the crowd parted to let her pass. The whispers and occasional chuckles followed her as she disappeared into the terminal. Elon turned back to the security officer. "Thank you for handling that," he said simply, retrieving his ticket. The officer nodded respectfully, no longer asking questions. As Elon stepped forward to board the plane, the woman behind him in line leaned closer. "That was impressive," she said softly. "You kept your cool?" Elon smiled faintly. "Sometimes all you can do is stay calm," he replied. "But it's important to remind people that their actions have consequences." As Elon settled into his first-class seat, he exhaled deeply, letting the tension of the confrontation melt away. The cabin was quiet, save for the faint rustle of passengers stowing their belongings and the occasional snippet of conversation. He glanced out the window, the airport bustling below as the plane prepared for takeoff. His mind wandered back to the scene at the gate. It wasn't the first time he'd faced something like this, and he knew it wouldn't be the last. But there was a deeper sadness in the whole ordeal, a reminder of how often people let their biases dictate their actions. The flight attendant approached with a warm smile, offering him a beverage. He declined, instead pulling out his tablet to jot down some thoughts. He was already thinking of ways to turn the encounter into something positive, maybe a small donation to an organization that focused on tolerance and education, or even a quiet meeting with the team at Tesla to discuss inclusivity initiatives. From across the aisle, a young boy peeked over the seat, his wide eyes fixed on Elon. His father noticed and whispered, "Yes, that's Elon Musk." The boy grinned shyly and waved. Elon returned the wave with a small smile, thinking how different the world might be if more people carried that childlike curiosity instead of quick judgment. As the plane lifted off, Elon leaned back, letting the hum of the engines drown out his thoughts. He wasn't one to hold grudges, and Karen was already a fleeting memory. What stayed with him, though, was the reaction of the people around them. The quiet support, the whispers of recognition, and even the subtle nods of approval reminded him that progress wasn't about perfection. It was about persistence. Hours later, Elon arrived in Austin, greeted by the energy of his SpaceX team and the eager smiles of the young students at the charity event. Watching the kids light up as they explored the interactive exhibits he'd funded was a moment of pure joy. It reminded him why he did what he did, not for recognition, but for the chance to make a lasting impact. That day, as he signed autographs for the kids and spoke to their parents about the importance of STEM education, one thought lingered in his mind. Sometimes the best way to challenge ignorance isn't through anger, but through example. By staying calm and standing firm, he hadn't just defended himself. He'd shown everyone watching that respect and dignity could silence even the loudest prejudice. As he walked away from the event, he caught sight of the boy from the plane, standing with his parents. The boy waved again, and this time, Elon walked over, crouching to meet him at eye level. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Elon asked. The boy grinned. "An inventor, like you." Elon smiled, tousling the boy's hair. "Then don't let anyone tell you where you belong. Always believe in yourself." The boy nodded, and as Elon walked away, he felt a sense of peace. The day had started with confrontation, but it had ended with hope. The story of Elon Musk's airport encounter highlights the importance of staying calm and composed in the face of adversity. It teaches us that judgments based on appearances or biases often lead to misunderstandings and unnecessary conflict. Elon's ability to handle the situation with patience and respect serves as a powerful reminder that understanding and empathy are key in resolving such situations. Through his actions, he set an example of how to address ignorance with grace rather than anger. Did you enjoy this video? What did you think about Elon's response? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the like button if you found the story inspiring, and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming and thought-provoking stories.